In this video, I'd like to talk about the math question of the day for March 16th, 2023. And we need to solve this system using the substitution method. And this is something that's typically taught in an Algebra 1 class, though it might be taught later depending on what school you go to. So at this point, go ahead and pause the video, see if you can work through this on your own. And when you're ready, unpause the video and we can go through this together. Now, assuming that you have attempted the problem, let's start working on it. And if you do have suggestions for future questions of the day, feel free to leave those as comments. Now, the substitution method will take one of these equations and solve it for one of the variables. And for this particular problem, this variable x has already been solved for. But we could also solve it for y. We can divide each side by 2 so that y is x over 2. It doesn't really matter which one you solve it for as long as you isolate one variable so that it's expressed in terms of the other variable. And once you do that, then you go to your second equation. And in this case, since we solved it for x, anywhere we see an x, we will replace it with what it's equal to from that first equation. But like I mentioned, if we solved it for y, then in our second equation, we would go to y and replace it with what it's equal to in terms of x. And by doing this, by replacing x with 2y, we will reduce this second equation to an equation with just one variable, and then we can solve for y. Once we figure out what y is, we just plug it into this first equation to figure out what x is. So let's plug in here. For x, we're going to replace it with 2y. And we can rewrite everything. We have 2 times by x, but x is now 2y. And I do recommend when substituting using parentheses. And in this case, it doesn't make a big difference since this is a positive quantity. But when you're dealing with negative numbers, the parentheses will help you keep your signs in order. So we have 2 times by 2y, since x is 2y, plus 6y is 15. So this will be 4y plus 6y is 15. And combining like terms, 4y's plus 6 more will be 10y's. And dividing each side of this equation by 10, we get 15 over 10, which is 3 halves. So y is 3 halves, or 1.5. And if we plug that value in for our first equation now, we can figure out x. Since x is twice y, and y is 3 over 2, the 2's cancel, and x will be 3 here. So we found a coordinate point, 3, 3 halves. And remember, when solving a system of these two equations where everything is linear, that we're essentially just looking for, on the coordinate plane, where these two lines will actually cross each other. And we found this coordinate, 3, 3 halves. Now I should mention this picture is not related to these actual equations. Just this picture gives you a general idea of what we're actually doing when solving a system. We're just finding where did the two equations, where do these two lines, when we graph them, actually cross each other. And sometimes you don't get an answer. Sometimes the lines are parallel. Sometimes you get an infinite amount of answers if the two lines are on top of each other. But in this case, we found a specific coordinate point, which means that the two lines intersect at one point. And to check this, this coordinate point just has to work with both equations. We know it works for the top one, since that's how we found x. We plug in 3. 3 would be equal to 2 times by 3 halves, which is true. That would just simplify to 3 is equal to 3. But if we plug it into the bottom equation, that will be our way to check this. We are plugging in x is 3 and y is 3 halves. And after simplification, if we get 15, then we know for sure this is right. 2 times 3, that is 6. 6 divided by 2, that's 3. So we get 3 times 3, which is 9. And 6 plus 9 is 15. So we checked it, and this coordinate point makes sense. So this is the solution to this system of equations.